Are you ready? The opinions expressed in this reading are not necessarily mine, but I support his right to hold them. Burning Man! There, I said it. We've come to the part of the book most of you have been waiting for. The part where Chicken's gonna trash Burning Man and expose the really ugly skeletons buried in the desert back in the old days and get accused of being a hypocrite because if I hate it so much, then maybe I just don't have to go. Right? Admit it. That's what you're here for. And it's gonna be a great time because the only thing better than Burning Man is hearing me tell stories trashing Burning Man. The line is shorter for one thing and you inhale less dust. So let's do it. Here we go. But first, I want to trash DJs. Well, not DJs exactly. I know some amazing DJs. There's a radio station in my warehouse. I wouldn't have put a radio station in my warehouse if I hated DJs. But I do want to call bullshit on the idea that DJing at Burning Man is a form of participatory art. Okay? It's not. DJing is a form of participatory art is bullshit. Because come on, where's the participation? If I play a track off my computer and you can dance, is participatory art, then your high school prom was participatory art. So was the movie you saw last night, because you see, somebody put a DVD in a computer and you got to watch. Maybe you even laughed or cried. Totally participatory. You want to do it again? Sure, okay, there's a wax museum. By walking around and staring at wax statues of Angelina Jolie and Albert Einstein, you have participated. You walked, you moved your body, you looked, you turned to the person next to you and said, how much did we pay for this crap? Feel like an artist? Feel like you participated now? If DJing is a participatory art, then the term has no meaning. If the act of being exposed to art is participation, then 100 million people participated in Thriller when they bought the album, and participated in the Mona Lisa when they pushed other tourists out of the way to look at it in the Louvre. I stole my copy of Thriller from Tower Records in New York, which I guess makes me even more of a participant, right? DJing can be a gift to somebody. Building a sound camp at Burning Man can be a gift to the playa. Assuming you aren't playing the same shitty beats all the camps next to you are, because that's not a gift, that's a form of abuse. Anybody who hasn't been tortured by a DJ has never been to a rave. But the premise that DJing is a participatory art is a pernicious dumbing down of what made Burning Man so interesting in the first place. Which was the idea that it's not enough to just show up. It's never enough to just show up. You have to be part of the event too. You have to be living as art. That's not easy, says Chicken John. I've been a carny of one kind for another for decades, and I know that's not easy. It's a lot easier to visit a museum than to live as art. It's safer. It's more predictable. That's the problem. The idea that showing up and DJing and dancing exactly the way you would at a club in Amsterdam, London, York, LA is good enough is part of an unconscious movement to make Burning Man more like a museum. Safe. Predictable, kind of pointless. That is not what Burning Man should be. That is not what Burning Man can be. Burning Man, at its best, is an enormous engine of possibilities. When it's firing on all cylinders, Burning Man transforms you because it forces you to make choices. Take risks. Assume responsibility. It connects people in ways that the world normally makes impossible. Burning Man happened in the first place because a whole bunch of people, many of whom I love, some of whom I can't stand, and a few of whom I'm going to accuse of terrible, terrible things, but all of whom have earned at a place in the history of art, went out and did exactly these things. They made choices, took risks, assumed responsibility, made connections. It was amazing. For every terrible thing I say about Burning Man, you have to remember that I devoted years of my life to it because it was amazing. And if I fought for it, it's because I fought for the things I love and against the things I hate. I always fought for Burning Man. Burning Man itself is an example of what participatory art should be. You are participating in an art piece if you are making choices, taking risks, assuming responsibility, and getting connected to other people through these actions. That doesn't happen when you just stare at somebody else's art installation, or when you dance to somebody else's beats. It's not actually the DJ's fault. They were a historical inevitability, like nation states or boy bands. A wall of DJs along the Esplanade became inevitable as soon as Burning Man committed the original sin. The original sin that every arts organization, merely by being an arts organization, has made. And by this point in the book, you should all know what that is. Have you been paying attention? You better be. This book is a fucking interactive art. The original sin is what, boys and girls? That's right, it formalized. It became an organization. That's what kicks you out of paradise and into the real world. Once that happens, it immediately becomes a part of the cycle of all arts organizations that I explained to you earlier. It doesn't matter how hip, cool, or original you think you are. It doesn't matter how many grants you've gotten, or how many exhibits you've exhibited, or shrooms you've taken, or groupies you've groped. Once you organize, you are going to be pulled by laws as firm as gravity down an eventual path to a real estate scam. Not even Burning Man is immune. I don't blame them for not knowing any better. I didn't know any better back then. Watching them is part of how I figured all this out. Honestly, we did an awful lot of philosophizing when you consider how much we were saying, oh shit, what did we do now? All the time. You'll get the stories, I'm getting there. In the meantime, that's what happens. Oh. As soon as Burning Man became an organization to which only a few belonged, the idea of participation took a big hit. It had to. Burning Man started out as all the people who showed up and did something. It had to. They were Burning Man. There was no Burning Man besides them. But once it organized, suddenly you had the people who organized Burning Man and the people who went to Burning Man. Do you see what happened? However much people who go to Burning Man are encouraged to participate in principle, in practice they belong to a spectator class. People whose primary function is to buy tickets. Have I ever told you about the second time I met chicken? People whose primary function is to buy tickets and wander around and look at the things and say they weren't as cool as last year. Sure, if everybody takes that attitude, then Burning Man will really suck. But it's easier for people who buy a ticket to somebody else's event to make the mistake of thinking that they can just sit back and watch. Their act of purchasing a ticket bestows neither decision-making power nor responsibility. It's great if they do more. It's absolutely fantastic if they want to build a car or attach a flamethrower and drive around playing techno with all the other cars with flamethrowers attached and try to get laid as a form of participatory art. But a floor has been built. When decision-making power or responsibility gets concentrated in the hands of an organization, it takes decision-making power and responsibility away from everyone else, making them spectators. And at that point, you're building a museum. So why not fill it up with DJs and let people dance to the greatest hits of the 80s meshed up with the greatest hits of the 90s? Burning Man has been weathering that pretty well, to be honest. A lot of people who attend feel like they have equity in the organization, like what they do matters. This helps keep it alive, but they're only half right. What they do does matter, but they don't have equity. The way it's set up, they can't. That means an eventual slide into wall-to-wall DJs. Thank you. Burning Man had principles, but it built a structure that didn't represent them. Recently, Burning Man has announced that it will change that structure. You heard that? It will become a non-profit, which is, I don't know, neat. I mean, sure, okay, good for them. Take some of the profit motive out of it. That's fine. Glad to hear it. It doesn't change the underlying issues, does it, John Law? If Burning Man really doesn't belong to anyone, how do you actually make it belong to everyone? How do you give people the decision-making power and the responsibility they need to really become more than spectators? Just being a nonprofit won't do it. The issue of how Burning Man is governed only makes a difference to the extent that it creates participation by providing decision-making power and responsibility to the participants. If Burning Man doesn't learn from the life cycle of all arts organizations, then it too will end up as a real estate scam. It has to, that's what happens. It's like the second law of thermodynamics, only with an investment portfolio. But Burning Man can be saved. All arts organizations can be. They don't have to end in recriminations and lawsuits and DJs. There's a way out. And I get the sense that Chicken's going to tell us what that is in his next book. And I'm a big fan of this book, but I got to read for you from this next one. Are you excited to see that too? Me too.
Candy Grace, everyone.